So I appreciate you all have different experiences that might have brought you here today. And for some of you, it might be that you're really struggling with menopausal symptoms. For others of you, it might be that you want more information or you're not sure of your options and you're just dipping your toes in. For others, you might have relatives that are really struggling and you want to help support them. So really, it's a huge topic, and I only really planned on tackling lifestyle factors today. So for those of you who haven't met me before, my name's Meg. I'm a GP. I work here in Rushcliffe, but I'm also a lifestyle medicine specialist. So that's my area of expertise, my additional expertise, and that's what I wanted to come to share with you today primarily. Some of you may have questions around HRT and medications. I hadn't planned to discuss that specifically today, but if we've got time at the end and you want to come up and ask me questions, I'm happy to do so. It can be really difficult to give proper counseled advice about medication options because all of you will have different backgrounds, different medical histories and different preferences. So that perhaps isn't the forum to do that in depth today, but in terms of questions and things I can field in general. So today I wanted to focus on lifestyle. But before I got to that, I thought we would just have a quick definition. And most of my slides haven't got a lot of words on, so excuse the fact that I have done so on this slide. But I just wanted to understand what the terms meant, because sometimes we hear these terms flashing around like menopause, and then some people say, oh, but it's the perimenopause. And what does that even mean? So those are quite clinical terms that we as health practitioners would use to describe the phases somebody would find themselves in when they come up towards the end of their menstrual life. So when we say perimenopause, that quite literally means near to the menopause. That is a phase during which your body is starting to adjust to your levels of hormones declining. So that may occur from the early to mid 40s onwards, or it may only last a few months for some. It's variable. And some people might find themselves with symptoms even earlier than that, and there might be other reasons for that. But this is a phase during which you might start to get some symptoms that we then associate with the menopause, but it may happen many, many years before your periods actually stop. And then when we talk about the menopause, actually clinically, that's a diagnosis we can only make in retrospect after your periods have been completely stopped for 12 consecutive months or more. If you're over the age of 50. Now, the average age in the UK of people's periods stopping is still around 51. Maybe slightly earlier now, around 50. So 50, 51 is the average age, but people will experience still having periods into their 50s or periods stopping in their 40s. It is a spectrum. But once you've not had periods for more than 12 months, we'll say you have now gone through the menopause. That doesn't mean that all of your symptoms stop. Well done. We can all applaud each other and move on. That means that some ladies are getting more symptoms actually around that time. So that's when your ovaries are now no longer releasing an egg every month, and your levels of estrogen, which is your main female hormone, along with the other female hormones, progesterone and testosterone, we have that too, they all start to decline significantly, and that's a period where we might start to get more significant symptoms. Not every lady gets symptoms around the menopause, or not everyone is even bothered by the same set of symptoms. So we're all very different and individual, and the range of symptoms are huge, but we may not get most of them. And some of us may not get any at all. Some of us, unfortunately, can be plagued with all of them. Sorry, my phone's not on. So it is really, really variable, and that's why it's important that when we're talking about symptoms and you're having a consultation, perhaps with a health practitioner, with a social worker, or with your GP, that the consultation is really individually focused to you and what your symptoms are, and more importantly, how they impact your life. Because when you read online about all the different symptoms you can get, you might not get all of them. They might not even bother you if you do get some of them. And what's relevant is how it affects you. But estrogen is our main female hormone, and there are sensors for estrogen in almost every single tissue of our body. So from our hair, skin, and nails, through to our brain, through to our gut, through to our joints, there are estrogen receptors everywhere. It's a hormone that has impacts across a wide range of systems, and therefore, when the levels fall towards the end of our menstrual life, we can get a wide range of symptoms. So I hope that makes sense. I hope most of you were sort of already aware of that, but I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. But today I really want to talk about lifestyle in particular, and some of you might be here because for you, HRT isn't an option, or perhaps isn't one that you particularly want to consider, or perhaps is one you've had difficulties with before and you're looking for other options. But I want it to be clear that lifestyle changes it's not an either or situation. So it isn't a case of, well, you either have HRT or you're stuck doing all these other things, right? So even if you're someone that does choose to take HRT to manage your symptoms, lifestyle changes are hugely beneficial. Not only will they potentially reduce the symptoms that you experience, but possibly even more importantly, they can protect you and your health moving forwards. So is anyone aware of any changes that you are at an increased risk of as a woman having gone through the menopause? Any illnesses? Osteoporosis, so thinning of the bones, is a really major one. That's a really key one, yes. Heart disease, yes, the rates of heart disease can go up after menopause, or you have an increased risk of heart disease. Any others? I don't want to scare everyone. So brain changes and dementia, there's an increased risk of developing dementia after the menopause. And that doesn't mean that everyone who's gone through the menopause is now going to become diabetic, have thin bones and heart disease. It's just when the estrogen levels fall away, your risk of those conditions increases. So the lifestyle changes that we're going to look at today, they all support and protect against all of those things. So not only will they reduce symptoms that some ladies experience, but also protect against those other things. So they have a double effect. And when I say lifestyle, what I mean is a range of different things: daily movement and physical activity levels, what you eat, your diet and nutrition, sleep, a really key one, stress and relationships with others, so our connection and our relationships, and then also other things that we might consume, so other substances that we might use, medications, caffeine, alcohol, or supplements. So those form the major areas of lifestyle, and those are the ones I'm going to touch on today and hopefully have time to get through all of them. And the evidence suggests that all changes in all of these areas will support our health during and after the menopause. Oh, it's flashing things. You probably can't read some of these little writings. This telly's not very big. The first one I wanted to start with is physical activity. So physical activity is a really, really important area of lifestyle, and one that we're not brilliant at hitting here in the UK. So the government recommendations for physical activity levels are 150 minutes, so that's 2.5 hours, of moderate level physical activity throughout a week. And when I say moderate levels, that means more than just a walking speed. It means something that will get you a bit out of breath, something that you have to put a bit of effort into, might make you sweat, might make you a bit out of breath. You'll know about it after you've done it. You know, you'll feel physically invigorated afterwards. So you might be able to hold a conversation, but not sing or hold your breath. So it would be a brisk walk, a jog, a cycle, a swim, physical exercise like lifting things. And 150 minutes a week is what is recommended as the minimum, all right? As we enter into our 40s and 50s, we often become more sedentary, not more active. And so levels of physical activity do decline with age. In women particularly. So in women, they did a health survey for England in 2021 to look at how many people of different ages and different backgrounds were engaging in different activities. And they found that only 29% of women over the age of 16 were meeting the government guidelines to undertake muscle building and strengthening activities in particular. It's less than a third of people over the age of 16. And actually those under the age of 40 are most likely to be doing that. Over the age of 40 and 50, it declines a little bit. And in our 70s, it drops off a cliff. There's very few meeting the recommendations in our 70s. So really the key is about trying to see if we can meet those minimum recommendations just as a baseline. But then more importantly than that is where to focus that. And for women that have become less active, it can be a real barrier to start to think, right, I'm going to start to exercise. I haven't exercised since my 20s. What on earth am I going to do? I've got joints that hurt. I'm a bit overweight. I feel nervous about a gym. You know, there's so many barriers. My bladder's not so great. And so the key is what we're going to do and how we're going to build it in. One of the things that you mentioned about in older age or after the menopause that's a real risk is thinning of the bones, but we also lose muscle mass as we get older and after menopause. So anything that builds muscle and is a weight-bearing activity is really important, particularly after menopause. So the guidelines suggest that we should be doing strength building and muscle bearing activities at least twice a week, but particularly after the menopause, we might want to be looking at doing it a little bit more often than that. Can anyone think of anything that might constitute a strength-based or weight-bearing activity? Like just pick some out. Yeah. Yeah. So things where you're actually bearing or resisting your own weight, so holding your own body weight or pushing against gravity, things like squats or holding planks. Planks particularly great for core strength as well, which is important as we get older. Anything else?
I do strength training, but only the last 6 months.
Lovely.
But I go to the gym 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So mine's usually sort of weights.
So you're looking at lifting weights and actually physically resisting.
Not high intensity exercise. It's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So more weight bearing.
Yes, yeah, which is a real change from how we might have always thought about exercise when we're younger. We're thinking about hitting a treadmill or playing tennis or that sort of thing, doing a sport. And whilst those things are really important and things that involve us impacting, such as running and those sorts of things are important, but strength-based activities can be slower and they can be more considered and they don't have to be high impact or high intensity. So you don't necessarily... Yeah, completely different. You don't necessarily have to go to a gym for it either. That's the other thing. Gyms are fantastic for lifting good heavy weights, or perhaps working with a personal trainer if it's an area that you're interested in. But we can do weight-based activities at home, which sounds bizarre, because I don't have a kettlebell or a gym in my house. But we don't need those things, actually. You can start really, really slow. So have any of you heard of Rangan Chatterjee? He was the doctor who did GP in the House, the Doctor in the House series, and his real focus is around lifestyle. He's got a fantastic little 5-minute kitchen-based workout that he says is fantastic for doing while you're waiting for your tea to brew. Okay, it's really, really short and it's really simple, but all of them involve strength-based or resistance-based activities. So it could be things like using the back of a chair to balance on and just simply doing some squats up and down. So you're using your own body weight to resist, or leaning against a countertop or a wall and practicing with a push-up. So somebody that perhaps has never been to a gym or hasn't been very physically active feels a bit daunted by the idea of going and lifting barbells and using rowing machines. Actually doing something really simple at home can be really accessible way of easing in. I think the other thing to point out is that we should always start small and build up. So nobody signs up to do a marathon and then goes out the next day and runs 26 miles. Right? If you sign up to do a marathon and you've never run before, you're going to start with 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and you're going to start with a little jog and move slowly upwards. If you started with 26 miles, you'd probably never run again. So it's the same with exercise in other ways. If we're not used to doing physical activity, don't sign yourself up to 3 Pilates classes, a spin class, because it will be something that's a step too far. You need to start small and build up. And the other thing is do something you enjoy. For the love of God, do something you enjoy, because if it's going to be something you do every day and you absolutely hate going to the gym and lifting weights, please don't go to the gym and lift weights, because you won't do it for very long. So pick something you love. Maybe think back to your younger years where there are things you used to do when you were younger. You've given up long ago, but actually still really like. You could look into rejoining dance classes or something like that that's actually enjoyable for you. I'm cycling through all of my slides. Sorry. Where are we? Physical activity. And the other thing is that as we get older, somebody mentioned core planks. As we get older, our risk of frailty increases as we age. Things like falls become a real risk. And when we talked about thinning bones, falls and thin bones can potentially equal fractures. So we want to think a little bit about improving our core strength and balance. So actually, as we get older, the shift changes to balance and core activity. So things like Tai Chi, yoga, Pilates, where we focus on our balance and space and time, can be really, really helpful for improving our core strength. There are some NHS apps and things that help with building up. So there is a Couch to 5K app that you can access if you're someone that would love to run. It's nice and cheap. You can do it from your own front door. It's not for everybody, but it gets you outside as well, and that can be helpful. But that will start you from never having run a step in your life to being able to run comfortably 5K, but it does it in very small increments and it coaches you through it, which is fantastic. But there's also the NHS Active 10 app, which looks at ways of building 10-minute blocks of activity into your day. And that's an app you can download I've also got it on the website. Active 10 can be really useful for just moving more each day, and moving more each day is key. So it's better that you opt to walk to your place of work, or climb stairs instead of using the escalator, or engage in something physical where you would normally have got someone else to do it, rather than just go to the gym once a week. So small blocks of activity are better than just occasional big efforts. So the next thing I wanted to focus on was diet. Diet's a really big one. I do a whole hour and a half just on nutrition. But I feel like it's useful just to hit some of the key points. The evidence shows that the more plant-based your diet can be, the more healthful you will be. So if you're not someone that eats a lot of fruits and vegetables, this is where we'd start. Okay, so you don't have to be completely plant-based. That's not what the evidence suggests, but the more plants you can eat, the better. And the more of them you can eat, the better. So the more variety you can get in your diet, the better. And that's why the science suggests that those having a more plant-based diet are both much more likely to suffer reduced risks of things like heart disease, diabetes, and cancers later in life, which are the things that we talked about you being at more risk of. They all increase after the menopause, so that brings your risk down. But they also, those with a more plant-based diet, suffer fewer menopausal symptoms. So there are lots of things tied up in why, and I'll try and break down the key ones for you. The biggest one is probably fiber, and the more plant-based your diet is, the more fiber you will get. We are horrendously fiber deficient in the UK. The Western diet contains the least amount of fiber in it than almost any diet globally. So we really do undereat fiber. We're all worried about protein. We're obsessed with protein. You can get protein in your Weetabix now. Didn't even know that was a thing I needed, but you can. But no one's talking about fiber. But that's the thing we're probably most in need of in our diet. So the more plant-based your diet is, the more fiber you get. Why do we need fiber? So many reasons. The key one probably is that you've got a bunch of really healthy gut bacteria that live inside your digestive system. And they're called the gut microbiome. It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, so we're sort of only just uncovering how important these little bugs are. But they feed on fiber. So all the stuff you can't digest properly, they do it for you. So all of the really tough, stalky greens, they love it. It's called prebiotics. You've all heard of probiotics, right? All the fermented stuff, you can buy capsules, but prebiotics are even more important. And that's found in fiber and plant foods. So if you feed these gut bacteria a really rich fiber-filled diet, they will thrive. And the more of them you have, the better your hormonal balance, the better your mood, the better weight loss you can achieve as well. It's amazing what they do. So they switch on and off so many genes. And they really have a real pivotal role. So that's one of the key reasons that fiber is helpful, because it does change our hormonal balance. But the other one is how estrogen is metabolized in the body, which I'm using big words now, but we take hormones and compounds in our body, we break them down when we no longer need them, and then we excrete them, we get rid of them, either through the liver and our gut or through our wee. And estrogen is actually removed through our gut. The problem is if we don't have a very nice, healthy gut where we're moving I'm going to indiscreet and talk about poos now, right? We're not moving our stool through our system nice and regularly. Stuff hangs around in the gut for longer than it should do. When it hangs around, we then have a chance to reabsorb half the things we've been trying to get rid of. And when we do that, we can cause real fluctuations in levels of things. It might sound like a good thing to reabsorb all that estrogen that we're now getting rid of, because, we don't have enough of it, right? We need more of it. But actually what happens is it causes weird spikes in the levels, and it can really affect your menopausal symptoms that you might get. We want a nice, steady stream. We want it to be released, digested, and then removed. And fiber is really key for doing that. Yeah. I don't think we fully understand the impacts of those yet. So they've not been around a huge length of time. They certainly haven't been involved in any large-scale studies looking at kind of hormonal balance and that sort of thing, and gut microbiomes as well, which I guess we'll only know later down the line how they impact some of those things. We know they have lots of gastrointestinal symptoms. So people who use Mounjaro and other injectables will often report one of the main symptoms that they get is nausea or discomfort in the stomach, and that's due to the fact that everything really slows down. So I guess time will tell if it impacts those other things, but that's a good question. So fiber's a really, really key one, but the other important things might be all of the other beneficial compounds that those plants have in them. So plants come in a variety of different colours and a variety of different flavours, from sweet through to things I can barely eat, like radicchio lettuce. Can anyone eat that? I've tried so many times. It's like the bitterest thing I've ever tasted. I like bitter things. So they come in a range of flavours and colours, and those flavours and colours are caused by different chemicals in the plant. We call them phytochemicals, which means plant chemical essentially. And all of those different compounds have different roles within our body. So that's why we ask you to eat a diverse range of. Have anyone heard about the numbers of plants we should try and eat in a week? That's a new thing. 30, yeah. So aim for 30 in a week, 30 for, and that's because whilst you could have a diet that was really rich in fruits and vegetables, if you only ever ate the same 5, then you're only ever getting the same compounds in those 5 things. And diversity is the key. So the orange color will give you a different compound to the purple color. A bitter flavor will give you a different compound to some of the sweeter flavors. And those are often things that are involved in reducing inflammation and improving our immune response. When our estrogen levels start to drop, that acts as a driver for inflammation to start. So dropping estrogen can cause increased inflammation, and that might be one of the key reasons why we're at increased risk of things like heart disease and dementia and other things. Using lots and lots of these phytochemicals and plant compounds acts to reduce our inflammation. They are really high in antioxidants. We've heard of the word antioxidant, right? It's been around in health as a buzzword for a long, long time, but it has real relevance. And the more plants you eat, the more antioxidants you get, the lower your levels of inflammation and therefore potentially fewer symptoms. So that is why plants are probably really important. And I think the other thing to mention is that often people struggle with weight around the time of the menopause. So our metabolism starts to slow down. We find it harder to shift weight. We start to gain weight around the middle. And it can be really difficult to shift. And people might start to think about dieting, restricting, and changing their eating habits to try and lose weight. And the key is about how we do that. Often people will opt to restrict their food. But what the evidence shows is that just leads to lots of energy level dips. And if anyone's been through the perimenopause or the menopause, they know all about dipping energy levels and not having the energy you used to do, feeling fatigued and groggy and foggy and irritable. And what we don't want is to do anything with our diet that means our blood sugars dip and we reduce energy, because it makes all of those symptoms worse. So the key really around opting for a diet that helps to limit our weight gain would be, again, to increase our plant intake. So the more fiber you eat, the fuller you feel for longer, and the slower that energy is released as well. It's released slowly in a more sustained way. So the key is not to restrict, but to eat small and regular portions with lots of plant-based fibers and also protein to help keep the energy levels stable throughout the day. Otherwise, we make brain fog and fatigue and irritability worse. Hydration is the other key one. So people can often suffer with bladder symptoms. Hands up who's been struggling with bladder symptoms, a safe space. And those that struggle with bladder symptoms might find their symptoms get worse during the time of the menopause or after the menopause, and will often opt to restrict fluids because nobody wants to be rushing to the loo when there might not be a loo, or having leaks. It's socially embarrassing. It's not. So we'll potentially opt to restrict our fluid intake. But that can really lead to an increase in our irritability, brain fog, and fatigue. And also flushes and sweats can be worse if we are not properly hydrated. So it's really important, if you're someone that suffers with bladder issues and you've been looking to restrict your fluids, actually being better hydrated is more important for your symptom control, and it might be worth getting those bladder symptoms looked at if that's an issue for you, rather than purely restricting your fluids in general. What else have I got written up here? I've talked about maybe ways that we can increase our fibers, little tips. So swapping white or processed carbohydrates for a whole grain version. So if you're someone that usually eats white pasta, white rice and white bread, that's a very easy swap. It takes a little while for the palate to adjust, but it is a fairly easy swap. You don't have to do anything different. You can still eat the same stuff. It's just a brown version. So that's an easy way to increase your fiber. It's really important to think about eating the right carbohydrates and good fats rather than avoiding all carbs because carbs are bad. And not getting and having such a low fat diet that we don't get the good fats, which are really important for hormonal health. We need fats for a lot of our hormones. And there are such things as good fats and bad fats. I don't like to call things good and bad. But saturated animal fats, so things you might find in red meats and butter and cheese and lard, those are the sorts of things that worsen heart disease and are not good for health, raise your cholesterol. Good fats are found in lots of plant oils, so olive oils particularly, nut seeds and avocados. Those are good fats, so those are really important, so please don't limit those when you're thinking about weight. Adding in beans, and we call them legumes, that means beans, chickpeas, peas, lentils, that family of foods. We don't eat very many of them here in the UK. Lots of other cultures eat them all of the time. 2-3 portions a day is completely normal. In the UK, we look at beans a bit like, well, if it's not a baked bean, I don't really know what to do with it, right? But they're so important for our diet. So if we can try and include them, even if it's just a portion a day, either with a hummus or adding sort of chickpeas to a chili that we're making maybe, or considering using lentils in a bolognese, or anything like that. They're really, really good source of protein and fiber particularly. Anyone got any questions around soy and estrogens? Sometimes people have heard conflicting things. Yeah. Yeah, fine. If it's not for you and you're not going to eat it or it's going to make you miserable, please don't eat it. But it is really, so it's a plant-based, it's like a plant version of our natural animal estrogen. It has some properties that are similar, but it's not completely the same. People often worry about using soy with a history of breast cancer. Actually, the evidence shows that soy is much more protective than of any harm. And the cultures that eat a really high soy diet, like in Japan, for example, they eat soy with everything, have the lowest rates of breast cancer. So it has a mimicking effect, but it's not the same. And because of its mimicking effect, it can have some beneficial impacts on menopausal symptoms, but it's not going to be a silver bullet. So by all means, don't worry if it's not part of your diet and you don't like it. It's fine.
I just want to say that I do use tofu.
Yeah.
And it does help me manage my sleep.
Yeah.
So I know when I've not had it.
Yeah.
And I would just push back and just say, try, and then go on TikTok, have a look at all the millennium recipes that there are on there. You can coat it in different things, you can dip it in different things. All many ways to try it. So
yeah, not just raw out the packet and expect it to be tasty.
I quite like bake my little batter with it, put it in the air fryer, and then dip it. And then when you go to a restaurant, maybe try their version.
Yeah.
That's when it's cooked really well, and you'll have an idea.
Yeah, really good advice. And so you could either eat it in its whole form, which is edamame beans, or soybeans. Yeah, so maybe just eat those. Yeah, they're fantastic. Add them to stir fries, just have them as a side, or in its processed form as tofu or tempeh, or in its fermented form, which is soy sauce or miso paste. But tofu and tempeh, there's so many different versions of them. One is not very much like another. Tofu with the 2 O's at the end of it, which you might see if you're around the supermarkets, definitely one of the most superior tofus that I've eaten. It's very, very realistic. It's not weird and cardboardy. And I find it better to rip it rather than cut it, because when you rip it into chunks, it has a better texture to it, and it also absorbs much more of the sauce and flavour. So as a tip. Leafy greens are a given. They're full of fibre, they're full of vitamin K, they're full of loads of other things that we need, antioxidants particularly. I put eat the rainbow. I used to do this with my kids, eat the rainbow. And the alphabet. It's just silly ways of being able to try and get your 30 plant chemicals, plant varieties in the week. Herbs and spices count as well, by the way, as does tea, but only once. So herbs and spices are really key. So herbs and spices in particular are one of the most powerful forms of antioxidants that we can eat. They're like super powerful things that we can add to our food. So cooking with loads of herbs and spices, even just putting things like cinnamon on your porridge, that counts. That's another one. So that's a good way of increasing your antioxidant levels. And minimizing your processed and junk food, really. Not only is it inflammatory, it's got lots of omega-6 oils and starchy white carbohydrates that cause a sugar spike and then a crash. There's no healthful reason to be eating them. That doesn't mean we don't all enjoy a bit. I had some stollen last night, it was delicious. Doesn't mean we don't always enjoy a bit of it from time to time, but just look at your diet critically and go, yeah, okay, do I need as many of them as I'm doing? Or is there a swap on this occasion?
Is there any evidence come through at all about, obviously want to eat more fruit and veg, it's important, but if that stuff's really pesticide, could you be cancelling out the good that you're trying to do?
Yeah.
What might that be doing to you?
Yeah.
I'm wondering around that sort of thing, not skin.
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. Yeah.
I do get one of these veg boxes all
yeah.
Well, I can't buy everything all the time.
It's a privilege, isn't it, to be able to eat organically, because it is really expensive, and that is an issue. You're completely right. So fruits and vegetables that are sprayed in organic pesticides are definitely harmful to various aspects of our health, but especially all hormonal health. That's one of the key things that is impacted by use of glyphosate and other compounds like that. It's really challenging to sort of sit here and give advice. If I was to sit here and give you my absolute honest advice, it would be to eat a virtually fully plant-based diet, entirely organic. That would be the best thing that you could do for your health. But I've got to be realistic. Everyone's got financial constraints and families to feed, and it's not easy to do. If you are in a privileged position where you're able to buy things organically, please feel free to do that. It almost certainly will have some benefit, and it's not always things we can see and feel immediately, but the evidence does show it has an impact. If you're finding that really difficult to do, you might want to stick to just buying a couple of things that will have the most impact. Have any of you heard of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15? Yeah. So there's a government organisation, well, it's a worldwide organisation that looks at pesticide levels across a range of foods and fruits and vegetables and meats as well. I've got plenty of other chemicals in them, to be fair. They will release a list every year of the worst 12 offenders for pesticide levels and contamination, and the cleanest 15 is at the minute. Things that are generally got very low levels or generally pesticide free. So this can be a good way if you want to make a difference, but you can't eat organically all the time. I don't either, it's prohibitive. Look at the list of the Dirty Dozen and just try to look at whether or not you could just buy those organically. So it'll be citrus fruits is a key one. They often have quite high levels of phosphates and organic compounds. If you can buy organic citrus fruits, that would be one easy win potentially. So that's an option. If you can't, and you really can't afford to buy any organic produce, please don't panic and feel like, well, that's it. I'm destined to have all these horrible hormonal effects. It makes a difference. It does have an impact, but it's not easy for everyone to engage in it. And I wish it was something that was better regulated so you didn't have to dip into your pockets to make that choice, but it isn't, unfortunately. But it's a good question. Right, I'm mindful of time. I'm going to move on. Substances. It sounds like it's going to be more exciting than it is. Maybe some of you are using some really cool substances. We can talk about that later. The main ones are probably caffeine and alcohol, though, are the ones that we consume outside of a standard diet. You know, when sleep is so affected by menopausal change, almost universally affected, often people will resort to sort of drinking alcohol, more alcohol than they used to in the evenings to help them unwind. They find it easier to relax. They might find it easier to drop off. And then conversely, the next day, hitting the caffeine pretty hard just to get through because they've had such poor sleep and they're feeling so fatigued. And you can see how these might feel like easy wins in the short term, but the evidence really does suggest they're probably doing you more harm than good. Not only because of the impacts of, we know things like using alcohol has other harms, but also actually they do worsen your menopausal symptoms. So alcohol, whilst it might make you feel sleepy in the moment and for the first few hours, once it's passed through your body and you start to break it down in the liver, the substances that the liver breaks it down into become stimulants. All right. And then it's like having had a few uppers at 2 a.m. And menopause does lighten your sleep. So you have a lighter sleep phase. It doesn't take a lot to wake you. And what you'll probably find is if you're drinking in the evenings, you're more likely to be waking at 2, 3, 4 a.m. and you're going to find it hard to fall asleep. So that is a challenge. It also suppresses the mood the following day and can make you more anxious. If anyone's suffering with mood changes around the menopause, alcohol can definitely worsen that. Caffeine is just it's not necessarily, I don't want to demonize it, it's very good for being able to focus in the short term, but there are some cautions. First of all is that It acts as a diuretic. That means it encourages your body to let go of more liquid than it would if you weren't drinking it. And for those reasons that we talked about before about hydration, and also those with bladder issues, drinking more caffeine can irritate the bladder and make bladder issues more difficult to manage. So bear that in mind around caffeine use. But it also takes a long time for us to break down caffeine. It hangs around for hours and hours and hours and hours. Everyone's rate of breaking down caffeine is slightly different, but it can be at least 12 hours to fully break down your caffeine. So usually around 6 hours later, there's still half of it in your bloodstream. So what we do suggest is that if you are going to consume caffeine, you shouldn't consume any after midday. And that includes cola drinks, so things like Coke, Diet Pepsi, that sort of thing. They've got a reasonable amount of caffeine in them. And it can worsen your mood symptoms like irritability and feeling a little bit anxious or panicky. It has very similar sort of effects on the body. So alternatives would be things like chilled water and herbal teas or decaf versions. Decaf versions of teas and coffees are not completely decaffeinated. They're mostly decaffeinated, but that's still a better option than drinking teas in the evenings. Herbal supplements I wanted to cover because a lot of people will turn to herbal supplements. Perhaps if you didn't feel ready for HRT or HRT is not an option for you or you didn't want to use it, it might go through herbal supplements. I've written a few down. Has anyone else heard of any others? Yeah? Sorry, I can't see who's shouting at me. Here, oh hi. Yeah, magnesium. Yes, that's an additional supplement. It's not necessarily a herbal alternative, but it's an additional supplement that can help with restlessness in the evenings and improved sleep. So yeah, magnesium is a good option. Any other kind of herbal things? Or yeah, red clover. So we've got black cohosh, red clover, sage. Oh, I don't know that one. That's root.
Yeah, she's got really bad menopause.
Yeah. Yeah. Did she say it helped? That's not a glowing yes. Maybe. Okay, it's difficult to tell. Yeah. So lots of people turn to herbal supplements, and I'm not here to say don't use them. The evidence, when we look at them in robust scientific studies, doesn't necessarily support them. There's not a huge amount of evidence to say that these make a dramatic difference across the board. But individually, some people do find some benefit in using some of these. So individually, if that's something you want to explore, I would say feel free, but be mindful of the fact that the evidence doesn't massively support it. And if you haven't seen a real difference or found an improvement after maybe 6 to 8 weeks, I would consider whether or not it's worth spending your money on. There are some that can interact with other medications, particularly St. John's wort has a lot of crossovers with other medications. So it is important that if you're going to decide to try that, and if you are on other medications, just let your GP know that that's something you're going to try, just so that they're aware and they can make any adjustments or give you any advice depending on what else you're on. So yeah, some people find them helpful. There isn't a huge amount of evidence to support them necessarily. There are other supplements which have got evidence. And these I would suggest for everybody, actually, regardless of your diet and regardless of whether you're menopausal or not. These are things that we're often low on, either through our diet or through the fact that we live in the UK. So B12 is a vitamin that we all need that is not present naturally in foods. It is made by bacteria. So bacteria make B12, and that is the way we would have had B12 before we started using pesticides and washing everything. We would have got bits of B12 through soil and contaminated salads and vegetables and things. We now meticulously scrub everything, and everything's been blasted to death with organic pesticides. So we actually don't get a lot of B12 now, and some people can be really low in it. They add B12 to animal feed, so they supplement the animals. So if you're someone that eats an omnivorous diet or you eat meat or dairy, you will be getting B12 because the animals have been given the supplement and then you eating the meat. If you're going to have a slightly more plant-based diet, you may find then that source drops out of your diet, but you can simply take the supplement instead of the cow taking the supplement. So don't fear, it's very easy to take. You can either go for a daily dose, or if you're rubbish at remembering it, you can just take a higher dose one once a week. Lots of different varieties available, and we could talk about the bioavailability of B12 forever, but essentially if you can just have some at some point, it can be helpful. B12 is really important for particularly nerve and brain function. So it's something that we can be quite low in, and people who are really low in B12 will often report things like feeling a bit foggy, and they might have some nerve symptoms or just not have very much energy. So those are the sorts of things they might report. So supplementing can be useful. Vitamin D, D3 in particular, is something that we only produce when we're exposed to sunlight. So sunlight converts it, sunlight on our skin converts the chemical into its active compound D3. It's probably actually more of a hormone than a vitamin. And it's really important, but because we live in the UK and it's always like this, we don't make a lot of vitamin D. If any of you have got darker skin pigment as well, you also don't make a lot of vitamin D because you won't convert as much of it in your skin. So particularly during the months of autumn, winter and early spring, I always suggest that people should look to supplement their vitamin D. Very easily available over the counter. Again, as a simple daily supplement, you want somewhere between 10 and 20 micrograms. Sometimes they're quoted in international units on the bottle. Often they say both. But vitamin D is a key supplement that I would always use. And anyone who's got darker pigmented skin or doesn't get outside very much in the sun in the summertime or is often covered up, consider using it all year round. For those of you who don't want to use it all year round, just make sure you get a good amount of sun on your arms and face for at least half an hour. But we don't get strong enough sunlight until at least mid-April in the UK to make it. So it has to be during the summer months. Iodine. So iodine is a compound which is really important for bone and particularly thyroid health. It's present in the soil and in vegetables that we eat. So you would think if I eat a really plant-rich diet, I'm going to get loads of iodine. But we have blasted all of the iodine out of the soil through years of commercial farming. And there is very little natural iodine. It really varies from place to place as well, naturally. So depending on where you get your vegetables from, depending on how they've been grown, actually they may contain very little iodine. You can be quite low in your diet. So natural ways of supplementing it, things that are high in iodine are often things like seaweed and sea vegetables, but the levels of iodine in them can vary wildly, and some can have huge amounts of iodine. And what it's probably safer to do is just take a supplement daily to make sure you're getting a steady amount, because some sea vegetables can be really high and you can end up yo-yoing or overdoing it. If you're eating lots of dulse, for example, it's got a high level of iodine in it. Omega-3s, we probably all have heard of omega-3s. Omega-3s are good fatty acids. They're important for metabolizing things in our body. They are anti-inflammatory in nature. They're important for making things like nerves and brain cells, and have a really key function. They are often in a mixture in foods with their counterpart omega-6. Omega-6 fatty acids are the ones that are probably more present in like cooking oils and animal fats and saturated products. So things like junk food, fried food, that sort of thing will be much higher in omega-6s. Those have the opposite role. They are more inflammatory in nature and tend to cause more harms than good. So omega-3s are the ones we want. So those are the ones that occur naturally in nuts, seeds, avocados, olive oils, that sort of thing. Those are high in omega-3s. For those of us eating quite a low-fat diet, and some people might be, you might want to have a supplement as a safety net or just a way of shoring up your omega-3 intake. You can just get them by adding about a tablespoon of ground flax or linseed to your smoothies, yogurts, porridge, soup, doesn't really matter, a day, or just 6 walnuts gives you your daily recommended amount. But if you're not a big nut and seed eater, you can take a capsule to supplement it. So that's quite good for brain health, and particularly as we get older and we start worrying about our cognitive decline, it can be a useful one to supplement. You don't have to. This is just something I would suggest most people think about supplementing. You can get multivitamins, obviously, which have probably got most of this stuff in, but it's just worth checking if you already take a multivitamin, does it contain these ones? Because these are probably the only ones you really, really need, unless you have other conditions. Yeah. I don't think you can really have too much omega-3s. It is really quite a good anti-inflammatory and compound with lots of benefits. The amount that you would have in a supplement is equivalent to like half a teaspoon of olive oil, possibly. Like it's obviously concentrated and just has the omega-3s in it, but no, you can't overdo it. Iodine you definitely can overdo, and that's why some people look to just using food for their source of everything, which is fantastic, and that's ideally what we should be doing. And they'll see, sea kelp is really high in iodine, and start buying it dried and adding it to everything. There have been some cases of people overdoing it with iodine and causing thyroid issues. So iodine, if you are going to supplement, I would just be cautious around just taking it as a recommended dose supplement and not overdoing it. B12, if you have too much, you'll just pee it out. So don't worry too much. That's why you can use a really high dose once a week or once a month, and you'll absorb what you need and pee out the rest. So that's no issue. And vitamin D, I mean, you have to be taking whacking doses to overdo vitamin D as well. So yeah, pretty good, pretty safe with most.
Retailers and providers. I'll be honest, I click on something on Facebook.
Yeah. 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 It's overwhelming, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. We've never been had more information blasted at us, and we've never been more confused. You don't necessarily have to have any particular preferred provider of these. I take a supplement called Veg1, which is designed for people who have a more plant-based diet, and has all of these plus a couple of others like selenium and a few other things which can be hard to take. But it doesn't really matter where you get it from, as long as you're getting them in some way. And I'm not saying that everyone must take these either. These are just ones I would recommend if you're considering using something. So you could take them all as individual supplements and have a B12 and a D3, and or you might find one that has them all in. It doesn't really matter. There are some supplements that are designed for menopausal women as well. They'll probably have a whole bunch of other things in that you maybe don't necessarily need, but most of these have been designed with hormonal health in mind. And as long as they're not cost prohibitive and there's no other reasons why you don't get on with them, feel free. But these are the ones that I can pick out. I want to get onto this one because this is the big one, isn't it? This is the holy grail of things. It's, as I said before, it's almost universally affected in women around the time of their hormonal changes. The hormonal fluctuations make your sleep lighter, so you don't sleep as deeply, which means you're more easily woken, even if you're not having hot flushes and sweats. And for those of us unlucky to get those can disturb you and wake you frequently in the night as well. You can then get mood-related symptoms the next day because no one operates on no sleep and feels their best self, do they? So lack of sleep can really compound difficulties that ladies are already getting. It is a challenging one. Lifestyle can make a difference, but I'm not going to stand here and say if you do all of the things on this slide, you're going to sleep like a baby. Be honest with you, sleep will always be affected to an extent, and it's really just about limiting the impact or trying to make the best, making sure we're not making it worse by inadvertently doing other things which might be impacting our sleep. So there's a few key ones, one of which, did anyone come to my sleep talk? I did one fairly recently. No, okay, so I can go through them all again. One of the key ones is getting as much natural daylight as early in the day as you can. So we want to really embody the sleep-wake cycle and set it in stone. And that might be from having a regular routine so that we go to bed at around the same time and we wake up at around the same time. And that includes weekends, so that we don't have a routine that varies, but also in getting enough natural daylight early in the day to really kickstart our sleep hormone and our wake hormones doing the right thing. So just 20 minutes of morning daylight a day, as early as possible, close to our wake up time would be great. For those of you who can't get out and walk the dog or walk to work or whatever it might be, you've got busy schedules, just eating breakfast in front of a large window, even light on a cloudy day like this is enough. It can be a really dark and gloomy day and you still get plenty of light. It's better than an overhead light. I think I said in my other talk, in my sleep talk, that the amount of light you get on a cloudy day in the UK is about 21 times greater than in a brightly lit room. So it is really key. So getting outside, getting plenty of daylight. Keeping your bedroom cooler than you think is a key one. Not only because people often suffer with feeling hot and flushes and sweats and things, but actually really helps with your sleep. So having a cool bedroom, almost chilly, where if you're not under the covers, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable sat out, that kind of level cool. So it might involve opening a window a crack even in the winter months, not necessarily for everyone. But if you're on the third floor in a modern house like me, you might need to crack a window. So keeping the room really cool and really dark. Those are the key ones to preventing us from, when we start to surface in the sleep cycle, from waking completely. If it's completely dark, we're much less likely to surface and wake, and we're much more likely to go back into our next sleep cycle. And if the room is cool, you can have a nice heavy duvet. That's fine if that's your preference. But as long as the air around the room is cool, it encourages. So it's to do with the body temperature, and that impacts whether you release enough of your sleep hormone, melatonin. So if the room's cool, you're more likely to. If you're someone that does suffer with flushes and sweats, and you're not averse to it, sleep naked, or just with a pair of pants on, or with a light cotton nightie. Okay, so you want cotton fabrics, not polyester, because they're more breathable, and the fewer of them, the better. It may help you to have a couple of layers, so you may want like a sheet and a duvet, and then you can throw the duvet off but still stay covered up, something like that. So you might need to adapt what you wear to bed, just to make it more bearable. And don't have a hot drink before bedtime. It sounds obvious when you think about it, but I quite like a hot drink before bedtime. But sipping cool water is better because it keeps your core body temperature low and it doesn't raise your temperature any higher than it needs to be. I said that keep sleeping and waking routine the same at the weekends, didn't I? We've talked about caffeine, avoiding after midday. That's a real key one. Even if you think, oh, it doesn't affect me, I can drink tea all day and sleep just fine, it will be affecting you, just not as much as you are aware of. But it will be keeping your sleep just that little bit lighter. And then it doesn't take much. It takes a noise outside or a bird song at 4 a.m. or, you know, your partner rolling over in bed, and then you're awake. So avoiding caffeine. And electronic lights. I think we've all probably heard of the emitting blue light of electronic devices. For those of you that haven't, screens like this, laptops, mobile phones, tablets, they emit a wavelength of light that mimics daylight. So it's a blue wavelength of light, like the day sky, and that wavelength of light, when it hits the back of our eyes, it tells our brain it's wake time. So when we're sat watching Netflix till 10 a.m. or we're scrolling on our tablets as we fall asleep, we're actually telling our brains that we need to be wide awake because it's daytime. So avoiding electronic screen use. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it stops you from producing as much melatonin. It doesn't get you ready for bed. And then your melatonin shift will come later. So you'll find it harder to fall asleep because the melatonin isn't there until possibly midnight, 1 a.m. You stop the blue light and the screens an hour before you want to go to bed. Ideally, you'll find that melatonin is where it needs to be at the time you want to go to bed. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's like a nice warm drink, makes you feel quite sleepy, but the caffeine in a normal tea will be working under the radar there for a number of hours. So try a herbal one or a decaf one. There's loads of herbal ones which are shown to be calming and relaxing as well. So we talked about herbal remedies not having a huge amount of evidence for menopausal symptoms, but there are some with lots of evidence for making you feel calmer and sleepier. And there's plenty of herbal teas on the market now that have got all kinds of things in them which help to soothe you, but yeah, possibly not a super hot one just before you jump into the sheets. Any other questions on sleep? Because I'm aware I haven't written it down, I've just rattled it at you. We can take more questions at the end if you think of any. I've lost my mouse. Bear with me. There it is. So one of the final ones then really is about healthy relationships. And this is a kind of a woolly, touchy-feely one, isn't it? Having friends, it's nice. But it's actually really, really important, and it's not talked about enough. We all know about the importance of getting some exercise and eating properly and not drinking too much, but none of us ever talk about the benefits of having close relationships in our lives. But it's actually one of the really key ones. And the perimenopause is a time that really can profoundly impact the sense of self. The number of women I've seen that just say, I just don't feel myself. I don't feel like me anymore. And that's such a depersonalizing thing to sort of look in the mirror or examine your reactions to something and say, well, that's not me. Like, I don't feel like me. And it can be a difficult period where we can have reduced sense of joy, increased stress, mood changes. And we're often at this stage in our life, we're often coping with multiple roles. Women in their 40s, 50s and 60s are often juggling work, careers, families, teenage children, elderly parents, other caring roles. Maybe they've got to a level where they're now a committee lead, or they've got other roles that they didn't have in their 20s and 30s. So the amount of responsibilities that women are juggling at this time can be huge. And it's easy to lose a sense of what's important to you and what makes you happy, because you're so busy doing what's expected or what you signed up for or what you've always done. and you lose a sense of yourself. So when we then compound the hormonal changes, where we really do sometimes just feel lost, nurturing self-care and quality relationships can be really, really important in refining that sense of self and joy. And it's not to be underestimated. The key one for self-care and stress management is probably to learn to delegate. So how many women find delegating really hard? I've got teenage kids and I try, but I find it really difficult to delegate responsibilities that we have naturally absorbed or done since they were little, or done things for our partners, or we've always done this for so-and-so. And just as our lives start to get really, really hectic and we start to lose our grip on reality, we forget we don't necessarily have to do all of them, right? We can ask others to step in. We can say, actually, can you shoulder a bit more of this responsibility? Or do you know what? You're 15 now. About time you learn to pack a dishwasher. Or say to your partner, look, I really can't manage the dog water. I've got so many on. Please, can you take that on? Or asking family members if it's all right if you just take a step back from that thing that they expect you to do every single week, because you always have. So delegation is really key. Is can you take some of that time back that perhaps has become lost somewhere over the years? Say that again. Yeah, because
as women we all carry, and
you're,
nobody else seems to realise that.
Yeah,
the bloody dishwasher needs doing.
Exactly. Even when you're not doing it, you're thinking about it, right? You know what needs to be done, and your brain is busy, right? It's full. It's really full. So can you relieve some of that load? Because what most people find is that they have stopped taking time for themselves. They've stopped doing things that just are purely for themselves or bring them joy or pleasure, exactly at the time that they absolutely need it the most. So it's the time where we've got the least amount of time in our day. People are like, I don't have time for that. I can't go and do meditation for 5 minutes because I'm juggling everything else. So I've got to put dinner on. I can't go and do a Pilates class. But actually, this is exactly the time when we need to do those things the most. So it's about finding that time and prioritizing our care when it's so easy not to. I don't need to teach you all how to find the joy in your lives, because for every one of you, it will be something different. For someone, it will be walking in nature. For somebody else, it will be playing a piano. For somebody else, it will be chatting to a friend on a phone. Only you know what makes you happy and what brings you joy and what restores you as a person. So maybe make a list of all the things that you love, that make you happy, that make you smile, that make you feel great afterwards. Make a list and then have a little look at your list and see how many of those you actually do. How many of those you actually do on a daily basis? Because we should be doing something every day that brings us that joy. 15 to 30 minutes a day of something that's only for you is often enough. It's about having the breather space, the filling up the jar when everything else is busy depleting it. Yeah. Say, actually, no. Yeah, or I don't have time for it today. Yeah. And you don't have to be shirty about it. It could be, I would really love to, but actually knowing where your boundaries are and saying, I haven't got the time or space. I need to spend this time doing myself. Not feeling guilty for spending time on yourself, which I think most women do naturally. Connection is the other one. Fostering really nurturing relationships with those around you has a huge impact on mood and stress levels. Anyone who's spent 15 minutes with a friend that they've had since early adulthood, someone you don't have to try hard with, someone who just gets you, someone you can have a laugh with, knows that at the end of that 15 minutes, it feels like you've had a full night's sleep. Like you feel rejuvenated as a person. But we all get busy, we all get sidetracked, and sometimes we let those relationships slip a little. It doesn't need to be long, but finding that person that means something to you and reconnecting. It could be a partner and things have drifted, or it could be friends outside of the home. It's a really undervalued but essential aspect of self-care. And it's really important to remember that as human beings, we don't exist in isolation. We've grown up in a society and community because we are social creatures. And because we are social creatures, we derive so much benefit from positive social interactions. There's plenty of social interactions that leave us drained and depleted. And I'm not talking about those ones. I'm talking the ones that really make you feel good. So it's about finding that time and prioritizing it at a time when you're feeling just a bit fragile otherwise. That's covered most of the aspects of lifestyle I wanted to talk about today. I've put a couple of resources. I haven't wanted to overwhelm you with them because I think, as you were saying, we exist in a world of a huge amount of information, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. The first one, the Lifestyle Tips for Hormonal Health by Dr. Hannah Short. She's also a fantastic lifestyle practitioner, and she's essentially summarized everything I've said into a couple of sheets. So it's a really useful crib sheet and revision for the things that I've said. She covers all of them in that link guidelines, but you can go through her website and see other things. Have any of you heard of the Balance app? Yeah, most people are aware of Dr. Louise Newson. She's a goddess in the world of menopause and done lots of research, but she's got an app. It's a free app. You can subscribe and pay money for the super duper version, but the basic app will still give you loads of articles about hormones and symptoms, HRT, alternatives, diaries so you can track your symptoms, so you can see progress. It can be really, really useful. It's quite empowering. The Clarity app is one that's specifically around mindfulness meditation, and it's designed with menopause in mind. There are loads of other versions of this. You might use Calm or Headspace or the Insight Timer to have a little 5-minute breather. Doesn't really matter, but I know that the Clarity one is particularly driven towards menopause. And there's a website, Menopause Matters, which is a UK-based sort of charitable organisation. Loads and loads of info on there as well. Obviously, there's also the NHS websites, which are actually really good now. Used to be a bit ropey, but I've been on there very recently, and there's loads of stuff on physical activity as well on there. It's really their physical activity section is great. They've got like videos to show you how to do things. So like there'll be, if you're not sure how to do squats or a lunge jump or a press up, for example, if you wanted to do some stuff at home, but you're like, I don't know where to start and I can't afford a personal trainer, app's got loads of stuff on the NHS thing on physical activity. I watched a few. It's got a full like routine. It's got a full Pilates routine if you want to follow that. So it's a really useful resource. And that's it really. We've got a few minutes for questions. If anyone has anything we've not covered, yeah. Yeah.
Where do we stand on this?
Yeah.
Pros, cons,
yeah.
Not suitable, used to be suitable, but not suitable now.
Yeah. Yeah. Where does it fit in? Yeah. It's such an emerging kind of science, and it fluctuates. Human beings have been fasting since the dawn of human beings. We've always gone through periods where we didn't eat or we had relative scarcity of food. And actually there are systems built into the body that are designed to kick in exactly at that point and do repair functions and improve and prune our genome and improve our immune system. Personally, I think if you can go through some periods of fasting at some point, there are huge amounts of health benefits. I'm not particularly worried about whether you're 50 or not. I think the key around age is around things like making sure you're getting enough calories and protein in particularly as we get older. I know I said we were all obsessed with protein. The only time you're allowed to be obsessed with protein is once you're about 50 or 60, when it's actually been shown to improve muscle loss. So it's about making sure that you're fasting in a way that still allows you to have all of those things, and you're eating a well-rounded diet outside of that. How you fast can vary. From my perspective, I think the safest and easiest way to introduce periods of fasting is simply to reduce your time that you eat in during the day. So rather than worrying about, I'm going to do a 5-2 or an alternate fast, or I'm going to do a week-long water fast or anything like that, it's much, much more accessible simply to say, I will eat and consume foods within a window of less than 12 hours in a 24-hour period. We often find with snacking late into the night, we might wake up quite early and eat, it extends our eating window, and then our fasting period ends up being only about 8 or 9 hours, which is shown hasn't been enough to kickstart all of those mechanisms. So as a very, very basic, I would restrict my eating window to 7 a.m. till 7 p.m., for example. If you can shorten it a little bit more, you'll get a few more benefits. So if you're able to bring it to like 10 hours, maybe, you could maybe do 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. Working on my maths now. You will get more benefits, and lots of people will find that easier to do. Plus it means you're going to eat your standard 3 meals in a day usually, and snacks and things, so it doesn't necessarily impact your energy levels outside of that time. That's how I would suggest doing it. But fasting has a huge amount of benefits, not only on weight, but also on reducing inflammation, preserving, like your aging is improved with fasting. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, there's no way of like, it's not like if you do more crunches, it'll go away. If you can increase your metabolic rate, that's the rate at which your body burns energy, you will start to burn. The reason that it lays down is because we're losing a bit of estrogen and our metabolism is slowing. And the combination of those things means we'll gain weight predominantly around our belly. If you can increase your metabolic rate, you will start to burn more fat. The best way to do that is to increase your muscle mass. So that's where the muscle strengthening activities and weight bearing activities come in handy. So cycling and swimming are lovely. They're great forms of exercise. They're really good for our mental health and our general well-being, but they don't really build as much muscle as weight bearing through either running, hiking, lifting weights, playing a sport. Those sorts of things are much more likely to, climbing stairs. Those sorts of things will build muscle mass, and that's the key, really. Any other questions? Yeah. 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 I think we often try to have a one size fits all approach to wildly different human beings. I think there is, generally speaking, evidence to suggest that, especially around the menopause, where perhaps your energy levels are fluctuating and you're feeling irritable and you've got brain fog and things like that, that eating small but regular portions of something is better than going for long periods in the day where you haven't eaten and then trying to sit and eat a huge meal, which will sit and weigh heavily on your gut. Whether or not you choose to eat 3 or 4 small meals, or whether you have your standard 3 meals with a couple of healthful snacks in the middle, I don't think that really matters. And I think individually people differ, and some people find it really difficult to eat meals frequently because that's just not how they're made up, and they might prefer to snack and then have a bigger meal at some other time. I think as long as you're mindful of your energy levels and you haven't gone for 4 hours plus without eating anything, there is some evidence to suggest eating little and often would sustain energy. But then also be mindful of that eating window that we were talking about before, and don't think, well, I need to keep my energy up, so I'm going to keep eating into the evening or just before bed. No need to do that. Your body will be fine without anything at that point.
Everybody, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you.